Let's go live to the opposition leader, Sussan Ley. She's speaking in Melbourne.
Crisis in Victoria. I do know that intervening with young people is part of breaking the cycle. You can't speak to a Victorian these days without a personal story or a personal connection with a victim of crime. That's how it feels. And Melbourne has gone from the most livable city to the crime capital of Australia. And sometimes crime can seem remote from our ordinary lives until you become a victim of crime, or you know someone in your family and friends who has become a victim of crime. And then it's very real, it's very personal, and it's terrifying, and it can change your life. We're in a city where, unfortunately, the streets are less safe, the train travel is less safe, the shopping malls are, but Victoria, Melbourne, it doesn't have to be like this. I love this city. I remember coming here as a teenager and living in Broadmeadows, and I was training to be an air traffic controller at Melbourne Airport. And I walked the streets feeling completely safe. And where I live, we reach down into Melbourne all the time. So I am really concerned with the fact that we have the crime statistics that we do in this city and in this state. And youth crime, unfortunately, is on the rise. But what that means is it attracts illegal gangs, organised crime, and we now hear that illicit tobacco is more lucrative than other drugs like cocaine. And that means, unfortunately, that victims of crime will be present and increasing. And when you consider that there's 1,000 young offenders that are cycling through the bail system being released continually onto the streets to commit more crimes, you realise that this Labor government has not got the situation under control. What we must do is back the police, restore community safety and toughen our laws. Now, there are Labor governments, both in Victoria and in Canberra. If you want a better Melbourne with safer streets, we need to move those Labor governments out, because the Liberal Party that I lead will always focus on community safety, on law and order, on backing our police who are stretched to the limit right now, and having the tough laws that we need to keep people safe. But we also know that we need facilities like this, and I want the Victorian government to look closely at the work that's being done here and recognise that this is somewhere a trusted partnership that Victoria could invest in and the Commonwealth could invest in. The Premier could ask her good friend, the Prime Minister, for federal funding for this facility, as other states have done with other PCYC models. That's not happening. With Labor governments in Melbourne and in Canberra, we are seeing this continual backslide. Just a couple of words on the housing statistics that have just come out. What they've shown is that Labor is failing miserably with its housing accord. It's 70,000 houses short already. So you hear the promises, you see the big numbers, but the reality is far from that. Labor is building excuses, not building houses. I'm delighted to be joined by my Shadow Minister for Education, Julian Leeser, and my Shadow Attorney-General, Andrew Wallace, both really invested in working for the hard-working Australians that want to see a better way forward. So, Julian, I'll hand over to you to make some remarks.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Andrew. And thanks to Chris and Anne and everyone here from the PCYC. I'm from New South Wales, and in New South Wales we have over 66 PCYCs. There's one in my electorate. We know they work. We know they play an essential role in helping reduce crime and in bolstering education. Here at this PCYC they have run a homework club. At the PCYC in my electorate they run sporting activities, they run community activities, they run activities for people who might be falling behind in the education system. We know that having a good education, achieving things at school is a good way to keep out of crime. If we're going to address the crime issues that are here in Victoria, where there is a crime epidemic, it's so important that we bolster organisations like this PCYC. So it's wonderful to be here today, and it's wonderful to draw attention to the fact that this is the only PCYC in Victoria. It has a vital role to play in the prevention of crime, and yet it is an organisation that today is not being supported by the Victorian government.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Julian. And I think it's really important to recognise that in New South Wales today there are 67 PCYCs. In my home state of Queensland, there's 56 PCYCs. And yet, as Julian just indicated, in the great state of Victoria, there's one PCYC in Victoria, and we're standing in it. Now, that is just simply not good enough. I was a youth worker, a volunteer youth worker in a past life, and I know how incredibly important it is to get access to young people. That early intervention, as Susan said, to show people that there's young kids, that there's a better way of life than a life of crime. And what people are telling me is that youth crime is the #1 issue, the #1 burning issue here in Victoria. And this Victorian state government, along with our federal government, have got to do better in protecting Australians, because that is their principal responsibility. But people like Anne and Chris here at the PCYC here in St Kilda have a very special job, and that is to engage with young people, to give them meaningful things to do, whether it's at the gym or playing basketball, whether it's helping them at homework. But this PCYC is at risk of closing because it gets no funding from either state or federal government, and that is an appalling state of affairs.
Thank you. Questions?
Victorian Premier this morning likened you to your predecessor Peter Dutton when he infamously came here and said that Melburnians were afraid to go out to dinner at night. She said you were punching down on Victorians by coming here and talking about nothing but crime. What's your response to that?
I'm not interested in the rhetoric that the Victorian Premier may come out with. I'm not going to get into any sort of war of words with the Victorian Premier. I'm here, we're here for the people of Victoria because we love this state, we love this city, we know they do. I've reflected on my experiences in Melbourne and I know that Melbourne can be better than this, and it is the way it is under a Labor government, and maybe that Labor government needs to look very closely at itself. We're here in a facility that is all about intervening. We want young people who are on a pathway for crime and hopelessness to find hope, to find resolve, to get support. Where is the funding, Premier? What are you doing in this critical part of Melbourne to support youth? And more importantly, what are you doing with bail laws that release people onto the streets to reoffend and recommit crimes? And Premier, how many victims of crime have you personally met, listened to their stories and understood what has actually happened to them in their lives? So this isn't about a political fight. This is about the fight we have every day for all Australians who work hard and who deserve, top of the list, to feel safe in their communities.
Would the opposition consider pushing the federal government for federal police perhaps to step in or intervene, or any federal funding to help with the crime crisis in Victoria, similar to what Trump did, I guess, with the National Guard in that sense?
The first thing that the Victorian government needs to do is support its own police force. They are stretched to the limit. What our police do every day in the face of this crime wave is extraordinary, and it deserves recognition and support and funding.
When's the Liberals' policy review process set to be done? When are you going to start announcing the direction of the party?
Well, a few weeks ago I gave a speech at the Cedar Forum, which is about economic development. My speech was about managing the budget, living within our means, and calling out Labor's spending, which is escalating rapidly to $1.2 trillion, leaving the next generation with a debt, leaving future generations worse off. And what I said in that policy speech was that we would manage the budget completely differently, and I set out how we would do exactly that. So I point people to that. And I also make this point, because it is serious, the way this government is spending your money, borrowed money, and the next generation's money. Every minute, it costs $50,000 just to pay the interest on the debt on Labor's debt. And that has to change. And we have to, for the sake of Gen Zs and millennials, get this back under control. And that was the important policy point I was making, and I made it again with the housing statistics that I mentioned. We have a divide in this country where you either have a house or you feel like you will never own a house. That's not good enough. That's something we're addressing. Watch closely in the next few weeks and there'll be more policy announcements.
Just on James Patterson says the apology tour must end. There needs to be a time limit on legal soul searching. So can you say when your reviews on contentious issues like net zero, tax and spending will be released?
Well, I just talked about spending and I just talked about some policy remarks there, and you'll see further policies made and explained. But I can reassure everyone that we are, across my team, working on policy development. We have 5 separate policy committees. My shadow ministers are reviewing policies, yes, but they're also bringing forward new ones. And they're going through all the processes that they should. Because what I said when I became leader was I wanted to enfranchise every single member of my party room who has a valuable contribution to make in the development of our policies going forward. And that's exactly what we're doing.
The net zero review? The net zero review? When's that coming?
Dan Tehan, an outstanding Victorian, is leading that review, and it's predicated on 2 principles: that we will bring forward a policy that has affordable, reliable energy, and it has to be a stable grid, and it has to be affordable for households and businesses, and we will play our part in reducing emissions. I draw your attention to Labor's 2035 targets and that they failed their latest announcements on cost and credibility, and their energy policy is a train wreck, and you will of course see ours further developed in due course.
Just on James Patterson, did he go rogue with his public comments about mass therapy sessions?
Not at all. I read James's speech. He actually sent it to me before he delivered it. Julian was there as a custodian of the oration, the Tom Hughes oration, and it's an excellent speech. And what it does is remind all Australians of our liberal values, where we back aspiration, where we back hard-working Australians that want to get ahead and play by the rules, develop a good future for themselves and their families, the Australians who built this country. So yes, I draw everyone's attention to the speech. It's excellent reading.
Have you spoken to the Victorian Premier? I know you're different sides of politics, but have you spoken to her, told her what you do differently to fix crime in the state?
Well, I know Brad Batten, the opposition leader in Victoria, has had many interactions and interventions on this important issue. And I hope that the Victorian Premier listens to Brad Batten, a former police officer, because he actually understands what needs to happen to get this state's crime wave under control.
As a federal opposition leader, obviously calling for change, surely you can have a conversation with the Premier, tell her what you think should be done.
Well, I know that Brad Batten will speak to the Premier, does speak to the Premier, and the Premier is well and truly invited to consult me and my team on anything she might wish to around issues that she seems to be struggling with.
Your views about the state of the Liberal Party in Victoria. Brad Batten's leadership is under a cloud at the moment.
Well, this is commentary that you as commentators are entitled to make. I know Brad. I catch up with him regularly. He's an outstanding opposition leader. He knows exactly what needs to happen in the state of Victoria. He loves this state just as we all do. He believes passionately in the future of its citizens and its manufacturing industries and its households. But everywhere you turn, you see serious problems. And here, to talk about the crime wave, I once again remind people there's a Labor government here in Victoria and there's a Labor government in Canberra, and they both need to address this.
Last question, guys.
Why aren't you recurring with Brad Batten?
Well, Parliament's sitting, and it's pretty difficult to get the leave passed from Parliament. Thanks, everybody.
Sussan Ley there in Victoria, where the crime wave has really been generating a lot of headlines. She's been meeting with locals this morning. We'll get further reaction on that story with our reporters in a moment.